Resident Evil launched a 6-movie franchise, a 2021 reboot, and a Netflix series, all from one low-budget zombie film that almost didn't survive its own production. This is one of the most successful video game adaptations ever made. But the version you watched in theaters back in 2002 was not the plan, not even close. Here's what's coming. A legendary horror director wrote an entire version of this movie that never saw the light of day. There's a band ending, shot, buried, and hidden away for years on a disc most fans never touched. And this whole film is quietly built around a children's book you read as a kid, hiding in plain sight the entire time. So here's the question I want you sitting with. When you watched Alice wake up alone in a dead raccoon city, do you think that was the ending the studio wanted you to see? Or was it something they were protecting you from? Stick around, because the answer is not what you think. Let's start at the beginning, because before Paul W.S. Anderson ever touched this story, somebody else had it first. And it wasn't just anybody. In 1997, Capcom did something wild. They hired a real horror director to shoot a live-action Japanese TV commercial for Resident Evil 2, and they didn't cheap out on it. This thing cost over $1 million to make. They cast Brad Renfro, a genuinely famous young actor at the time, as Leon Kennedy. They cast Adrian France as Claire Redfield. They built the Raccoon City police station set, brought in a professional cinematographer, and hired a special effects artist known for his zombie work to build practical zombies that attack the cast in the hallways. It plays like a legitimate horror short film, not an ad. And because of Renfro's contract, it only ever aired in Japan, so almost nobody outside the country even knew it existed for years. Sony and Capcom watched this thing and were floored, so they went straight to the guy who directed it and said, "We want you to write and direct our movie." Now, here's where it gets strange. He delivered a full script, he built out characters, he built out concept art, he had everything ready to go, and then it just disappeared. No movie, no credit, nothing. Why would a studio hand their entire franchise to a director whose test run blew them away and then throw his version away completely? That director was George A. Romero. Yes, the godfather of zombie movies himself. His script followed the first game closely. Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine as the leads, written as a couple alongside Barry, Rebecca, Ada, and Wesker. He even had the Tyrant, the game's iconic monster, designed by artist Bernie Wrightson. This wasn't some lazy pitch. This was a real, fully built version of Resident Evil from the guy who basically invented the zombie genre, and Capcom rejected it. They wanted something faster, punchier, more action movie, and less slow-burn horror. The man who created the zombie movie got kicked out of his own zombie movie. Sit with that for a second, because that's not the end of the story. That's just the first crack in the wall. Romero didn't walk away after one script either. He kept trying, and what he tried next tells you exactly how far this franchise almost went in a completely different direction. Now here's the complication. Romero didn't just write one script and walk away. He wrote his first draft in only 6 weeks, set almost entirely inside the game's Spencer Mansion, and stayed faithful to the source material in a way nobody expected. Especially considering Romero wasn't even a gamer himself. He had an assistant record a full playthrough on videotape just so he could study the story beat by beat, and then he kept going. In a 2002 interview, Romero admitted he wrote 5 or 6 different drafts total. 5 or 6. That's not a guy who gave up easily. And here's the part that should stop you cold. The head of production actually said Romero's script was good, not bad, not unusable, good. So if it was good, why did none of it make it to the screen? What actually killed it? The real reason comes straight from Kulzer himself in that same Fangoria interview. He said Romero's version was written to be the ultimate zombie movie, full of heavy action and gore, visually closer to Dawn of the Dead, with scenes of people having their faces melted by acid and getting torn apart or decapitated by monsters. And Kulzer flat out said it. In his words, "We could not have shown it to a regular theater. We could not have shown it on television, and the video would have been sold in the X-rated section." That's not an exaggeration for a headline. That's the actual producer explaining that Romero's cut was so brutal it would have landed an X or NC-17 rating in the US and an FSK 18 rating in Germany, which basically meant no theatrical run and no TV airing in one of the film's biggest funding markets. The studio head, Bernd Eichinger, the guy behind Das Boot, wanted something more prestigious and mainstream, and he wasn't willing to bankroll a movie that couldn't even be advertised on television. Romero refused to soften it. That standoff dragged on until 1999, when the studio quietly dropped his script and fired him. And here's the part that stings. Romero has said he found out he'd been fired by fans online before the studio ever told him directly. A grittier, more disturbing Resident Evil genuinely existed on paper, and it died because it couldn't be sold on TV, not because it was bad. Before we get to that ending, though, I want to know what you think. Would you have wanted the NC-17 Romero version of Resident Evil? Brutal, slow burn, closer to the games? Or are you glad we got the faster, punchier Anderson version that actually became a franchise? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to see which side wins. All right, now let's get into the big one, the ending. You know the version everyone remembers. Alice wakes up alone, strapped to a hospital table, walks out into a raccoon city that's completely gone, streets full of the infected, nobody coming to save her. It's bleak, it's cold, and it's set up 5 more movies. But here's the thing most fans never saw. There's a second ending. A real one, fully shot, that got locked away and only surfaced 2 years later on the 2004 Deluxe Edition DVD, released right as the sequel, Apocalypse, was hitting theaters. And it didn't just show up quietly buried in a menu either. Anderson personally sits down and introduces the clip on camera, walking fans through exactly why he chose not to use it. Think about how rare that is. Directors don't usually hand you the road not taken and then explain their own reasoning for killing it. That's not studio damage control. That's a filmmaker settling a debate with the audience directly. Here's the truth. The devastated Raccoon City ending was always Anderson's real plan from day one. It wasn't forced on him. It was his vision the whole time. But during production, that ending was too expensive to shoot properly. So instead, they filmed a cheaper backup version just in case. In that alternate cut, set 6 months later, Alice shows up at Umbrella's headquarters in a sleek leather coat straight out of The Matrix, looking for Matt. Guards draw their weapons, she draws hers, and the scene cuts to a close-up of her eye as a gunshot rings out. It was even supposed to include a bullet time shot of a grenade breaking apart into guided mini-missiles. Full Matrix cosplay. And then Anderson watched it back, and he knew immediately it didn't belong. It didn't match the tone of the rest of the film. So he did something almost no director gets the chance to do. He scrapped his own cheaper ending, went back, and shot the expensive, haunting Raccoon City finale instead, the one you actually remember. The band ending wasn't buried by some studio executive protecting you from the truth. It was buried by the director's own gut, because he knew it was the wrong call. And here's the detail that ties the whole thing together. That grenade launcher moment didn't just vanish. Years later, it showed up in Resident Evil Retribution, except this time, Michelle Rodriguez's character, Rain, is the one firing it. The band scene wasn't erased. It was recycled into the franchise down the line. So the real story of the Resident Evil ending isn't a cover-up. It's a filmmaker trusting his instincts over the flashier, trendier choice. And once you know that, it's hard not to notice how much of this movie is built on instinct and hidden structure that most people scroll right past. The whole film is secretly built on Alice in Wonderland. The lead character is literally named Alice. The T-virus test subject is a white rabbit. The squad enters the hive through a mirrored door, straight out of Through the Looking Glass. Kaplan is constantly obsessed with time, just like the white rabbit, and Matt's sister is killed with an actual Alice in Wonderland paperweight. That's not a coincidence. That's a director hiding a fairy tale inside a horror movie and daring you to notice. Even the small stuff has meaning. When those commando bodies vanish in the laser hallway, that's a direct nod to the original PlayStation games, where defeated enemies would disappear the moment you left and re-entered a room because the old hardware couldn't handle rendering that many bodies at once. And that opening close-up on Alice's eye at the very start of the film, that's a direct visual callback to the title screen of the very first Resident Evil game. Here's the bigger picture though. This movie almost got buried by an NC-17 rating. It almost shipped with a cheap Matrix knockoff ending instead of the iconic one we got. And it survived because one person trusted his gut over the easy, cheaper, more marketable path. That's rare. Think about how much content gets made today. Fast, algorithm-friendly, built to hit a trend instead of built to be right. Resident Evil almost became one of those disposable choices. Instead, somebody looked at the safe, cheap option and said, "No, we're doing this the right way, even if it costs more." That's the kind of decision that built a franchise that's still going more than 20 years later. So, here's what I want to know. Was scrapping that Matrix-style ending the right call? Or would you have actually preferred to see Alice storm Umbrella headquarters guns blazing? Pick a side in the comments. I want to see this debate play out. And if you want more banned endings and hidden secrets from the movies you grew up on, make sure you're subscribed because we're just getting started.